Vidushi Sandhir. Welcome to the Deeply Simple podcast. Here we break down deep concepts around holistic healing and wellness into simple and easy to understand ideas so that you can incorporate them into your daily life. Today is one of the episodes in a series of conversational podcasts. I have been speaking with people who work in the wellness field. Before I introduce the guest for today, I did want to say that this podcast is available in the video format on YouTube, and it's also available on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and RSS. All the links are going to be down below. It would be great if you could like and subscribe in case the content speaks to you, because that really helps people find my channel. So now let's talk about the guest for today. Our guest today is Dr. Ram Rao. He is the principal research scientist with Apollo Health. He has a PhD in neuroscience and biochemistry and has worked extensively on age-related neurodegenerative diseases. But that is not all his profile. His knowledge is a very interesting blend of Eastern and Western medicines, because he is an Ayurveda practitioner certified by NAMA and is one of the most respected and loved teachers at California College of Ayurveda. I can attest to that bit, so can my classmates, because he is my teacher in CA College of Ayurveda. He's also the writer of a book, Good Living Practices, which lays out Ayurvedic principles in an easy but comprehensive manner and to help make constructive lifestyle changes and mindset changes. I highly, highly recommend the book, and I'm going to drop a link to that below. And today we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Ram on Ayurveda and its relevance in our rapidly changing world today. So welcome, Dr. Ram. Thank you so much for taking time for this very humble podcast. And we're very excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Vidushi. That's really very nice of you to call me. And I look forward to having a very wonderful discussion with you about Ayurveda.
Great. So let's just dive right into it, Dr. Ram. And as I just mentioned, that you have a very unique blend of Eastern and Western medicine. And would just like to know, what has your journey been like and what led you to Ayurveda in your journey?
It's been a fascinating journey. There's absolutely no doubt about that. When I look back, I'm really glad that I came on this path. Now, as to what led me to this, it's, I think it's all the divine forces that led me to this program. When I look back, I'm not surprised though, because the reason is my maternal grandfather was actually an Ayurvedic physician and a teacher. And my grandfather from my father's side was actually a Vedic priest, and he taught several aspects of the Vedic sciences. That includes rituals, yoga, pranayama, meditation, the 6 philosophies of life. And then, but of course, it stopped with that because my dad was actually a chemical engineer and a researcher. So now you can combine that. Now you see a researcher, and then a Vedic priest, and then an Ayurveda teacher. So I guess all these karmic influences brought me in this family. And of course, my tendencies unfolded into this path and paved the way for what I am now. What exactly happened during my Ayurvedic journey, how it all began, is actually several years ago. There was a serious condition with health condition that my wife had, and she was an ardent believer in Ayurveda and yoga. This was the time when both Padma and I, we actually moved to California from Minnesota, and she wanted to sort out or look out for Ayurvedic treatment for health issues. It was a 3-hour consultation, for a physical condition. And the practitioner provided a comprehensive list of to-do things. And, at that time I was a full-fledged scientist, and I'm looking at the list and I'm thinking, what the hell is this? I mean, she has a physical condition, and he's recommending things for not just the body, but even for the mind and for the emotions. And even though that complaint was a purely physical condition, and this was sort of unheard of and not recommended if you look at the mainstream Western medical system. But despite my reservations, Padma actually followed all those interventions very closely, and we kept going to that center every month. And each month, the practitioner tweaked the program a little bit here and there. And so the program consisted of not just the diet, but it had herbs, it had physical exercise, it had sleep routines. It also called for mental exercises, breath practices, meditation, selfless service, karma yoga, and practicing loving kindness. And guess what? In about 8 months, 6 to 8 months, Padma actually experienced a dramatic improvement in her health. And it took some time, but by following this program for about, let's say, 1.5 years or so, she was completely symptom free. And then it was during one of those meetings with the practitioner that I also came across Dr. Halpin in that school. And after learning my background, he asked me if I was interested in practicing and teaching Ayurveda. And that was the time when I was fully involved in lab research and scientist, and I just didn't have time. But then he said, Ram, if you have the intuition or if you have the motivation, then things will fall in place. And sure enough, they offered a weekend program, and then I started the program. So it was a 3.5-year program. I finished the program and then finished my internship, started seeing patients. And then within 6 months, I got a call from the College of Ayurveda saying that, would you like to teach our students as well? So then I enrolled in their training program. And then, and by then what happened is actually both Padma and I were very serious yoga students. And so we finished our yoga teacher training program as well. And then I started teaching yoga. And then I realized that, yoga and Ayurveda, we just couldn't delineate the two. It had to be a combined sister sciences. And so it turned out to be beautiful. I'm enjoying it. I'm seeing patients, and I'm putting this into practice even with my with the people in my clinic where they come for Alzheimer's memory loss. And so turns out this journey is really fascinating, and I can understand why there's so much of improvement, and there's so much of importance to this entire medical sciences, which we can talk about, as we move with these question and answers.
Wow, what a story, Dr. Ram. That's pretty incredible. Even though you had the facets and different components of chemistry and science and Vedic influences, but still kind of like bringing it all together, I think was still something where you had to take action, even if you were presented with the opportunities. And it's great. You mentioned something that you're talking about your story starting from 2000s, where it was relatively unheard of that mind, body have a connection. And this is something which people are realizing today. And I think that is one of the reasons, not the primary reason, why Ayurveda and yoga are coming back into the front, and people are kind of curious about that. So what is Ayurveda to someone who is maybe a little skeptical or they don't understand what that is? There is so much information and misinformation on the internet. So how would you explain and just break it down very simply to people?
Yeah. So if I were to define this entire sciences, the way I would put it is, it's actually a lifestyle-based program that was adopted in India or in the Indian subcontinent. Let's put it that way, Indian subcontinent, because a lot of other countries, in addition to India, were practicing the sciences. This was way back in maybe 5,000 years, 6,000 years. We cannot predict the exact time, mainly because of we keep getting these dates on different literature, palm leaves that tells us about 5,000 or 6,000 years back. So this was the lifestyle practice being practiced then, for not just for keeping good health or maintaining good health, but even if they had any issues, that is, if they went out of balance. Mainly consisted of massage, meditation, yoga, breath practices, dietary changes, mental exercises, and the use of herbal remedies. And the basic, if you look at the basic principle of Ayurvedic system of medicine, was more than the medicine, they talked about prevention. Okay, they talked about prevention, and then if at all, despite the preventive strategies, if at all you succumbed or you fell to, or you had a disease, then how do you manage that? So management of disease, so prevention and management. And so that's the reason why, if you look at the word Ayurveda, it actually translates to knowledge of life. So when you talk about life is just not about physical life, but your life in view of where you are at the moment with your environment, with the interaction with the seasons, with the climate, with the time, and all these things. So basically, what it does is it encourages lifestyle interventions and natural therapies in order to regain your own balance. And when they talk about balance, Vidushi, it's just not physical balance. So that's one thing that we have to be very clear. And that's the reason why Ayurveda has become very popular now, because even though now modern medicine is talking about mind-body medicine, Ayurveda talked about mind-body interaction, mind-body nexus 5,000 or 6,000 years back. And they said very clearly that you cannot delineate the body from the mind, and not just the mind, even the emotions were included as well. And so the goals of the treatment were to reduce not just the physical symptoms, but also to make sure that the person was healthy at the level of the mind and at the level of the emotions as well. And that's not the only thing. The other thing that is fascinating about Ayurveda was that they talked about it as not a tailor-made approach, but a specific, highly individualized program. And that's what we're talking now in modern medicine as well. We talk about individualized programs and not something that is tailor-made for everybody. And that's the reason why, especially now with the pandemic, you're seeing more and more resurgence of these sciences.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, because you are right. When we look at Western medicine, I know that it's changing now, but we look at Western medicine from the point when we know that something is wrong or something is potentially wrong, but we don't focus on what really led to that point, which is the prevention part that you were talking about, or just sustaining a balanced life. That is not really talked about. Now, it is in some ways, but it's not the focus of Western medicine for sure. So that's like an important distinction that you made there with Ayurveda. That was very interesting. And another thing that stuck to my mind, Dr. Ram, was, I mean, clearly it's individualized and clearly it's extensive, because you mentioned your wife's first consultation was 3 hours. So it wasn't a quick, what's your problem? Here is a medicine, or here is like a topical cream or something. But let me look at you as a person and understand what's going on. That's an extensive treatment. So I know and I understand that it's very hard to distill Ayurveda and give someone like a quick overview or summary of Ayurvedic principles, because it's a very extensive science, which is why there is formalized education around it in the US that we are also taking. But let's talk about today's world, where I feel, being a part of the corporate world, or even if people are not in the corporate world, apart from the physical disturbances, there is a lot that's happening in the mind with the pace of the world and the noise in the world and the commotion. Where does Ayurveda kind of fit into that, with where the world stands today, with a very, very fast, rapid movement, which you just have to get behind? You're either in or out.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, because if you look at the population in general, just not in the US, but throughout the world, notice one thing, one underlying common thing among us is that we do not like to spend money on health issues unless we become sick. And that's a very important point. So we just don't want to spend any money on maintaining our health on a daily basis, but we are ready to spend money only when we become sick. Okay. But now what's happened is everyone is now becoming more wiser, and they are now willing to invest their money in what we call the preventative care model. Okay. In general, people are recognizing that disease, poor health, suffering, all these come about when the emotions, mind and body are out of place, are out of alignment. I like to call that as a fractionated life. Fractionated life is what we were doing all along, thanks to modern medicine, because modern medicine always, the impression that one took from modern medicine is that we are just the body alone if we have physical symptoms, or we are the brain alone if we have any problems in the brain. Okay. But the thing is, modern medicine never talked about a person as being a complete individual. So if somebody came with a physical symptom, they just treated the physical symptom, but they didn't talk about what should be addressed behind in the terms of emotions and mind. Okay. And so, or for that matter, let's say a person with mental issues, they never talked about diet to address that. Okay. They just gave a pill and it said, address this for your mind. immunity is no longer a foreign word now. Immunity is something which everyone understands, but we need to take one step further. I in all my talks, I keep saying immunity is not physical immunity alone. Immunity is also what you achieve at the level of your brain or mind and at the level of emotions. Okay, so with this awareness, what happens is every person becomes more empowered, and takes different actions to support healing, and so that they are able to create or recreate a state of health that is more harmonious to what they were. So because of this, what's happening is, and more people are now realizing the importance of Ayurveda and yoga, because they realize that Ayurveda and yoga both talk. In fact, in all the training programs, they are going on hinting on the fact that it is the mind-body complex and not just the body alone or the mind alone. And so now if you talk about Ayurveda, it's like opening up a new channel that somebody can adopt or somebody can practice. And so what's happening, and because it's a very open and welcoming science, people are accepting it in a greater fashion. And people are noticing it. They're noticing that even though the changes are very subtle, it's very subtle, but it sustains. That's what we want. We want it to be sustained. Okay, today you get well, but then there's no point in dropping off the pill and then once again suffering from the condition a week later or 2 weeks later. That's not the case with Ayurveda and yoga. Ayurveda and yoga says that as long as you keep those interventions, then you're able to sustain the problem that you have. So for example, now a very traditional Ayurvedic practice called neti. Neti is where you're trying to improve your sinus health. Okay, and which involves a daily practice of putting osmotic saline solution or saline solution through one nostril and then allowing it to flow out to the other nostril. But notice what's happening is these days, almost all pulmonologists, people who are looking at the lung disorders, okay, all the pulmonologists, don't be surprised, they all keep neti boxes in their consulting office, and then when a patient comes, that's the first thing they hand over. And then cleaning the tongue is another important aspect that modern medicine is now thinking about.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would say has definitely helped with the media is that not just the Western world, but people who are maybe not that familiar with holistic healing and the holistic healing world, they have found some common lexicon to talk to each other. Like meditation is no longer an Eastern practice anymore. Meditation is now more like a global practice. So people have found that common lexicon. When people come to you, do you see like an overall change in the way they view their lifestyle or how they become aware of their body or their thoughts? Have you seen that cascading effect happen?
It's like, you can keep on changing the bulb when it goes off, which is the pill approach, or you actually go to the backside of your home and then see if there's a problem with the actual electrical meter and try to change the electrical meter so that your bulbs don't get broken off, or they don't lose power so on a regular basis. So Ayurveda always says go to the roots, and if you have to go to the roots, Vidushi, what happens is the change, because imagine now trying to address from the root itself. So it's going to take a long time for those changes to happen. But what's happening is because you're addressing the roots, it's slowly percolating up into the body itself and into the brain and into the mind and into the emotions. In the Ayurvedic approach, you actually follow up with your patient every month. Okay, so you just don't stop seeing them. You continue seeing them. And then what happens is within 3 months, and even before, you can put the question, within 3 months, believe me, Vidushi, if they follow all the protocols that you have recommended, if they follow it to the T, within 3 months, they'll come to you and they'll say, we are doing much better. And you ask them, what do you mean by much better? They cannot explain, because they're not seeing a small change in one area. They are seeing a bigger picture of themselves, a bigger healing part that are happening, and they just cannot explain it. But they know that something's really good. Okay, they'll tell you that their sleep is better. They'll tell you that breathing is much better. They'll tell you that their eyes are not foggier anymore. They'll tell you that in the morning when they wake up, their mind is not cloudy. They have more clarity. And while describing all this, somewhere down the line, they'll say, oh yeah, even the pain for which I came to you, that pain is reduced. So you see what's happening is they themselves will not address the symptom because they're addressing all these other changes that they're seeing. And then finally they may tell you, oh yeah, for the pain that I came to you in the initial stages, that has come down to a level of 2 or 3.
But it's a positive change that you want to continue that in the lifestyle. And because we're talking about lifestyle, I want to mention Dr. Ram's book again, because I started reading that. Remember that Ayurveda is individualized, but even then the book has these living practices which are constructive for anybody looking to make a change. They're very simply laid out. So I'm going to again drop the link is down below. I'm going to put a screenshot here of the book again. And Dr. Ram, that was such good information. I did want to call out something that was alien to me, and I didn't know that it's not just physical issues that someone can come and see an Ayurvedic practitioner.
A person who comes to your office with a physical symptom for an Ayurvedic consultancy will have some emotion of the brain or some emotion of the mind which needs to be addressed simultaneously. Because what happens is these emotions, again, I mean, they may be expressed, or some of them they may even be suppressed, okay? But they don't, patients, when they come to you, they'll not normally talk to you about emotions. But what happens is, this is the interesting point. Generally what happens is these emotions in some form or the other, they show up in the body. They show up in the body in the form of either a pain, a chronic pain. It may show up in the form of chronic inflammation. It may show up in the form of chronic constipation. It may show up in the form of chronic indigestion. And these are all physical symptoms, Vidushi. But when we do a thorough questionnaire with these people, we realize there's a lot of things happening at the level of emotions. Okay, and then when you ask them saying that, for example, anger, when you ask them, when did you have this anger, the typical thing that the typical answer is, oh, I've had this for several years, but I never thought it to be, this was part of me. I mean, I get irritated and I get angry, but that has nothing to do with the symptom I'm expressing now. So why don't you treat the symptom? And I'm like, no, there's a reason why the symptom has come about. And that reason is probably because of all the heat that you have generated over the years through your anger or through the rage that you have had. And so we need to address at that level as well. And that's the reason why it becomes a comprehensive approach. That's the reason why when we ask our questions, our questionnaire runs to like nearly 150 questions. And in that 150 questions, we talk about their habits, we talk about their lifestyle, we talk about their day-to-day practices at the level of the body, at the level of mind, and at the emotional level as well. And the reason being that when you have some problems in the mind at the level of emotions, you are weakening your physical body. And then depending on which area of the body becomes weak, that area now shows up in the form of an imbalance. So that's the reason why, be it even if it's type 2 diabetes, or if it is incontinence, or if it's constipation, we always go back and address the emotions as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what also makes it sustainable, because if the emotions are not looked at, then they would repeat, because it's a cycle. They would repeat and the physical symptoms would show up again. So that's very interesting. One thing that Ayurveda specifically gave me, and I'm not sure if the people who see you resonate with that, is, so there are people whom you might hear saying, I get very stressed out, or I get really angry. I don't know why that's the case. And there's a little bit of self-judgment associated with something that they see in themselves. Ayurveda kind of helped me accept the tendencies that I have, but learn how to use them in a more constructive way. So for example, you mentioned heat and heated emotions. And I'm like very conscious right now because I'm saying this back to my teacher, but you said heated emotions. So heat is not necessarily bad, for example. I think that is what sometimes we learn and end up thinking, that, if there is aggression or if there is anger, everything about that person is wrong. There is value to heat, but it just needs to be directed and used in the right manner to be constructive.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you brought that, because there was a time before my Ayurvedic practice, before my yoga practice, there was a time when these heated emotions which I used to have. So there was a time when during my postgraduate studies and during my PhD program, and of course when I was a postdoctoral fellow, when I came to this country, I was a postdoctoral scientist. My emotions were out of control, and so it used to show up very regularly, okay, on a regular basis, in terms of in terms of my eyes would become red. And people always thought I was an alcoholic, and until today, I haven't touched a bottle of wine or beer or anything. And so I was never an alcoholic, but my eyes used to become very red. And I kept going to all these ophthalmology centers and all that, and they would just say, "Oh yeah, you're fine. There's no problem." Because what it meant was that some blood vessels, some tiny blood vessels, would have broken down and giving the reddishness. Okay. Not only that, there's just like the heart pressure, the eyes also, there's a fluidic pressure called the intraocular pressure. My intraocular pressure always used to be very high. And the doctors would tell me that please be careful, because if it is going to be high like this forever, then you're going to have a condition called glaucoma, which is, that's a very dangerous situation. Only when I started my Ayurveda and yoga practice, I realized where this was all coming from. Okay. And so that's when, and that's the reason why I like the way you put it. So then I tried to channel my emotions. I tried to channel my I wouldn't call heated emotions, but the heat in me. Okay. So that it becomes a little more balanced. Okay. So I needed that heat to motivate me. I needed that heat to pursue my goals. I needed that heat to achieve my objectives, but I wanted to make sure that the heat doesn't destroy me at the level of the mind and the body. Okay. So I have to be very careful in how I balance those heated emotions. So on one hand, it is helpful because it allows you to pursue your goals, but at the same time, you don't want it to go out of control, which results in destabilization of the body. All right. And so once I understood this whole phenomenon of the heated based emotions and how it can play havoc with your physical body, I channeled it so well that now it's very rare that I see the eyes burning, the eyes reddishness, because that would dry you out. The heat would dry you out. Okay. And I used to experience that. But now all that is gone, thanks to the way I'm channeling the heat.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a very first Ayurveda class where we mentioned that one of the purposes of Ayurveda is, so let's say there is somebody who's dealing with these different physical symptoms. There is redness in the eye, there are indigestion issues, and they are in some kind of chronic pain. That takes so much of their energy and their time away from the reason why maybe they came to this earth. What was their purpose and what were they born to do? So once kind of those physical symptoms are taken care of and they understand themselves and their emotions as something constructive, they have more energy to kind of focus on why they were born. And even if people don't believe in that aspect of spirituality, just kind of they have more energy to do what they want to do in life, as simply put.
Yeah, this is something which all of us, and it's just not anger, with this fear, with this worry, anxiety, depression, okay, rage, jealousy, all these judgments. And that's something which we have to learn about when we, and that's something which we learn in our Ayurvedic journey, how to channel those things.
Yeah, and one thing that I really liked in your book, Dr. Ram, is that there are case studies. So obviously the confidentiality of the patients is protected, but what those case studies helps, for example, me, and maybe they'll help a few other people who will get their hands on the book, is it made a scenario very real. There's a person who's going through something, and then there's a journey that they go through, and there are aspects of the journey that I could relate to, which helped me understand how Ayurveda or how these living practices can help. So that was actually really, really useful. I enjoyed that part of the book as well a lot. You've mentioned being in balance a few times, being balanced, being in balance. And one of the ways where you helped us understand balance, one of the ways was the senses, the 5 senses that we have, and kind of how do we bring balance in what we are taking in through the 5 senses.
Right. So, it's very, very important. I'm glad you brought it up, Vidushi, because here is something I would like to call attention to. Almost all of us have a car, right? So what happens after you drive the car for about 5,000 to 6,000 miles? Suddenly the dashboard gives an indicator saying that it's time for a routine maintenance check. Okay. So then if you go by that indicator, you go to the nearest mechanic, and then what the mechanic does is they'll check all kinds of fluid levels, the brakes, the wheels, the treads on the wheels. Why is it that you're willing to spend so much of money on a car, okay, and willing to purchase all those new things? Why are you doing that? Why are you investing on that? Only because you know that you are traveling every day to work, and you want to make sure that your journey is fine and that you are not going to end up into some sort of an accident because you have a poorly maintained car. Okay, so now let's reflect on our own selves. when was the last time that we underwent a tuning on our own selves? When was the last time that we underwent a maintenance on our own selves? Why is it that we don't, why is that we are not trying to invest money into our own selves and say, okay, when is the last time I had a tuning up? Our body is more complex than a car or an auto. So where do we look for? What do we look for? Well, so that's the beauty of the entire system of Ayurveda. Ayurveda said one way to approach your own self in order for proper tuning or maintenance is to look at your 5 sensory organs. And why is that? Because on a day-to-day basis, everything that we do, everything that we do on our own selves, everything, the way we act, the way we react, is because of all the impressions that we bring through the 5 sensory, through the 5 sense organs. Okay, sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Which means then that as long as you bring harmonious impressions, you are healthy. If you bring disharmonious impressions, you're going to go out of balance. So if you have to bring harmonious impressions, you have to make sure that your sensory, all the 5 sense organs are functioning properly. Okay, so whether it's the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, and the skin, all these are the gateways through which you're going to bring all the impressions. It could be anything. It could be diet, it could be massage, it could be the breath, the air through the nose, it could be the things that you're watching outside, maybe the violent things that you're watching, or the natural things that you're watching. So all these are impressions that are going to create you, or that is going to create me. So regular tune-up or regular maintenance of your 5 sensory organs. So the ears, okay. Very simple technique, oleation, because a lot of people experience simple things like either ringing in the ears, or they're filled up with wax, or they have pain in the ears. This is a very common complaint. All this means is that you're not taking proper care of your ears. So start oleating your ears, simple thing, okay. And then same thing with the nose. I mean, the minute you have the change in seasons, people talk about allergies. So make sure that you take proper care of your nose. And Ayurveda has got beautiful practices. They talked about neti, they talked about nasya. Nasya is now a very well-known modern science-based approach. Modern science is now approaching a lot of their interventions through the nostril, thanks to the neti and the nasya, because they now realize the importance of the nostrils and the importance of the sinus regions. Okay, same thing with the mouth. Okay, how is your mouth? I mean, what about your tongue? I mean, are you cleaning your teeth regularly? Are you cleaning your tongue regularly? Are you doing your oleation of the mouth as well? Because now we know that the bacteria in the mouth can cause havoc not only to the digestive system, it causes havoc to the brain as well. Okay, and then so we address, and then the skin, of course. You know, what are you doing with your skin? Are you exposing it to the sun like crazy? Are you applying all those things that you're not supposed to apply on the skin? Because remember one thing, people think the skin as sort of an inert thing. They say, oh, you apply anything on the skin, nothing happens to you. But that's not true. Anything that you apply on the skin will enter the body and then can create a lot of problems. And so whatever you apply on the skin, make sure that you first see what is it in the ingredients. Are those things that you would normally put in your mouth? If you think you're not going to put in your mouth, then why apply it on the skin? It's a simple logic. If you can't put in your mouth, why apply it on the skin? So make sure that your skin is nourished. Make sure that your skin is toned. So all the 5 sensory organs have to be toned, have to be regularly maintained. And Vidushi, one more important thing that now Ayurveda kept talking about that, but now modern medicine recognizes that. And I think I've mentioned that in my book as well. Even though these 5 sensory organs appear to be disparate or appear to be different or sort of away from the brain, they are all linked to the brain. And so any problems with these 5 sensory organs will create havoc in the brain as well. So that's the reason for example, in my setting where we talk about people with memory loss, Alzheimer's disease, they come to us, okay, at Apollo Health. I mean, we have noticed time and again, people with memory losses are the people who have had issues with their mouth, who have had issues with their gums, who have had issues with their ears, who have had issues with their skin. You know, they stepped out into the forest and then their skin was not so good. So they became more susceptible to mold infections and fungi infections, and those infections have now caused problems in the brain. So the 5 sensory organs are extremely important. That's why sensory therapies are extremely important. And if you do this on a regular basis, every 3 months, okay, we are not calling for every month or every week. If you can do it every week, that's fine. But every 3 months, or if not every 3 months, at least once in 6 months, if you do it on a regular basis, it's going to help you a lot, because it's going to prevent major imbalances from reaching you. And so the minute you talk about taking your car to the auto mechanic, think about your own 5 sensory organs and say, okay, let me do that same thing for myself before I take the car to the auto mechanic.
That's actually a good way to remember, like a retrospective on yourself that you schedule every 3 months at least, and just sit down and understand, what am I, like, how are all my 5 sensory organs, and what are some of the impressions that I'm taking in. So like I mentioned, I used to get angry, and I still have anger, but I remember that I was really into horror and action-oriented movies. And then I was like, well, I'm kind of creating the problem for myself. I'm feeding my eyes and my ears these violent images, which are basically increasing what I already have. I have a proclivity to anger, and it's kind of shooting that off the rocket. So yeah, no, definitely. I think a retrospective is a great advice. And I know your book has both physical maintenance of the organs as well as advice on taking in more harmonious impressions as well. So it's very holistic.
Yeah, absolutely. So they should also be talking about in terms of what kind of impressions they're being, in terms of the emotions they bring in, the emotions they draw into the 5 senses, and how they're dealing with that. So all these and then of course even the mind as well. So if you're seeing something, what exactly is going on in your mind? Let's say you're watching somebody some game or something, and what exactly is happening in your mind right at that moment? I mean, is there a lot of violence going on? And if that is a continuous thing, because that's what happens, right? I mean, if you're watching violent TV serials on a regular basis, it's going to create that violent kind of atmosphere in the brain as well. So it's all about not just the physical things, but the mental things as well. What exactly, what are the kind of impressions you bring in through those senses as well? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
right, absolutely.
So, Dr. Ram, you mentioned that you also see patients. Do you have a website or something that I could share with people, and I will drop a link to that if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, the best thing is let them, I mean, I can give you my email address. The website, I'm not, it's sort of, it's stagnant right now. I've not done too much of things on the website, but they can always reach me through the email, and I'd be very happy to talk to them.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Ram. This was so much information packed in just 15 minutes. I think it is very useful.
It's a lot of information, but yeah, but I think, the good thing is, Vidushi, because of this forum, I'm sure even if people get even 0.1% of the message, that in itself is good. And once they put that into practice, it'll really help them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the reason why the information is there is because it is a comprehensive science, because it is a science, but this is very useful introduction to just get people curious and understand that Ayurveda is beyond just diet and digestion, for example. So thank you so much for all the information and wisdom and knowledge that you shared today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Vidushi, and have a good day.